She sat there, in the pitch-dark room, her hands still stained with the blood of her son, just lost to a drunk driving accident. No apology. No justice. Just a chilling silence and the cold indifference of a society that looked the other way. From an ordinary mother, she became the victim of a tragedy no one wants to claim. But in the deepest pit of that pain, a journey no one saw coming had just begun. Her name was Han. Before all this, her life was like that of any ordinary woman: go to work, come home to care for her husband and child, doing her best to hold her little family together piece by piece. Her son, Nam, had just turned 16. A bright, respectful boy who dreamed of studying abroad one day. They weren't rich, but their house was always filled with laughter. Until that one fateful night. Nam was walking home from his evening classes when a car slammed straight into him right in front of their gate. The driver stepped out, reeking of alcohol, but casually pulled out his phone and called a connection. Han rushed out and held her son in her arms. Blood poured over her hands. His eyes were still wide open, like he hadn't even had time to understand what had happened. 4 days later, Nam died in the hospital. His death ripped her world to pieces. But that wasn't the end. The driver's family hired a lawyer, dragged the media into the mess, and twisted the truth. They claimed Nam had crossed the street carelessly. Claimed the driver had only had a little to drink because he was tired. The outcome, a suspended sentence, a rushed compensation payout like it was just some minor incident. She screamed. She begged. She knocked on every door, from government offices to journalists to social media. But all she got back was a wall of silence and the pitying shake of a head. Some even told her, just let it go. What's done is done. Pushing it further will only hurt you more. From a mother, she became a victim. From a simple, warm home, everything turned to ashes. She didn't just lose her son, she lost her faith, her sense of justice, and any reason to keep on living. And in the darkest depths of her despair, something in her began to shift. No one knew it yet. But from the heart of tragedy, a hero was quietly beginning to rise. 49 days after her son's death, Han cut her hair short, sold off everything in the house, and left the neighborhood that had become a prison of grief and silence. She didn't tell anyone where she was going. People said the shock had driven her mad. But what no one knew was that in that very madness, she had made a choice not to forget, but to fight. She arrived in Hanoi and started taking odd jobs in charity kitchens. Every bit of money she earned went toward night classes in law. No college degree. No connections. No safety net. Just the quiet pain of the other mothers she had met in hospital waiting rooms, women with the same haunted eyes as hers, eyes that had seen loss, despair, and helplessness. She listened to their stories. Wrote them down. Little by little, Han became the bridge, helping them speak to the press, find legal support. At first, there were only a few. Then a dozen. Then hundreds. They began to call her Chi Han. The one who wasn't afraid of anyone. But the path she walked was far from easy. She was threatened. Someone once threw a brick through the door of her rented room. One mother she helped had her child forced to transfer schools. There were days she wanted to give up. Why am I carrying the pain of others, she thought, when I haven't even healed my own? Then one day, at a court hearing for a traffic accident case, the victim's mother turned to her, took her hand, and said through tears, "If it weren't for you, I would have died with my child." In that moment, Han understood. She was no longer living just to carry her own sorrow. She was walking a path that Nam, her son who never got to live his future, had unknowingly left behind. A path she never imagined for herself. But now, she knew. If not her, then who? Han slowly came to realize something. All this time, she thought she was struggling to reclaim justice for her son, but in truth, it was her grief that had been guiding her towards something far greater. She was no longer just the mother who cried herself to sleep over an unjust verdict. Now, she had become a voice for those who had never been heard. For the poor mothers who lost their children to undocumented labor accidents. For the children abandoned in the chaos of domestic violence. For the lawsuits that vanished quietly because there was not enough evidence or because the other side had connections. Every story cut her anew. But they no longer broke her, they woke her up. For the first time, Han stood before a large audience, sharing her journey at a conference on victims and the law. Her hands trembled, her voice cracked with emotion. But when she looked down and saw the eyes of hundreds watching her, not with pity, but with admiration, Han knew. She had crossed the line that separates a victim from a force of change. That night, she returned to her tiny rented room and opened her son's old email inbox. Inside were letters Nam had written to her but never sent. On one small note, he had written, "Mom, when I grow up, I want to be a lawyer. I don't want poor people to lose just because they have no voice." She broke down in tears. Now she understood. Nam hadn't just left this world, he had left behind a part of his heart, a part of his dream, living inside her. A dream she never even knew she shared. She no longer fought out of vengeance. She fought to keep a promise for her son. To make sure no other child had to die in silence. To let her pain become the fire that lights the path for those still trapped in the dark, just as she once was. This was never a mission she chose. It was a mission that chose her. 3 years after her son's death, Han came home. The old alley was still the same, narrow, damp, its patchy walls still waiting for a fresh coat of paint. But this time, she didn't return as the broken mother who once left in silence. She came back as someone who had walked through the fire and survived it. The neighbors looked at her with surprise. Some avoided her gaze. Some offered only a faint greeting. She understood they weren't bad people, just afraid. Afraid to face the truth. Afraid to remember how they once turned their backs and said nothing. The first person Han went to see was the wife of the man who had killed her son. When the woman opened the door, her face turned pale. Han said nothing about the past. She simply handed her a piece of paper, an invitation to a panel on traffic safety, where the woman could speak out, if she ever wanted to tell the truth. Not everyone has the courage to make things right. But Han believed in giving them the chance. Then she walked to the cemetery. A soft breeze stirred the air. She sat by her son's grave for a long time. No more tears. Just stories. Stories about children saved from abuse. About mothers who had finally won justice after years of silence. About a new community legal project she was about to launch named Nam, Justice for the Voiceless. For the first time, she felt peace. Not because everything had been fixed, but because she had learned how to face it all. And forgive not just others, but herself. Her return wasn't to reclaim what was lost. She came back to remind others and herself that from a place of deep pain, it is still possible to rise and begin again. No one thought she would go this far. But she did. Not for praise. Not for recognition. But so her son's death would not be in vain. Since returning, Han no longer lived in nightmares or the haunting grip of loss. She began a new rhythm of life, simple, quiet, but full of purpose. Her project, Nam, Justice for the Voiceless, officially opened in a modest office tucked away in a working-class neighborhood. There, Han and a small team of volunteers, most of whom were once victims themselves, offered free legal education classes, helped prepare legal documents, and held group therapy sessions for those struggling to heal from grief and trauma. She no longer chased the spotlight of conferences, nor sought recognition from the media. What brought her peace now were the late-night phone calls from a stranger, a mother sobbing on the other end, whispering, "I didn't know who else to call. I only have you." Or the trembling handwriting on letters sent to her office. "Thank you for believing I wasn't wrong, when no one else did." Han kept living, not as a hero on a pedestal, but as an ordinary woman who simply refused to turn her back on other people's pain. She still lit incense for her son every morning. She still kept his last white shirt hanging by the door. But now, it wasn't a symbol of grief, it was a quiet reminder. From pain, something kind can grow. She was once a victim. Then someone who rose. Now, she is a place, a refuge, for others to hold on to when life becomes too much. No one wishes for tragedy. But if it must happen, then choosing to live on meaningfully is how we answer fate with all the dignity the human heart can offer. And sometimes, heroes don't need capes. All they need is a heart that once shattered, and the courage to let it heal, so it can love again. Someone once asked Han, if you could turn back time, would you still choose this path? She was silent for a long while, then smiled softly. I didn't choose any of this. The pain chose me. I only chose not to let it destroy me. Life never warns us about what's coming. Some people lose everything in a single moment and disappear. But some, like Han, rise from the depths and use their loss to carve out a path for others. We can't control what life throws our way, but we can always choose how we keep going. If you're in the dark right now, please don't think you're alone. There are people like Han, people who have fallen, broken, and bled, still out there quietly lighting the way for you. And maybe, one day, you will be that light for someone else in their darkest hour. Keep living, not to forget, but because there is still something worth living for.